Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. I'm just delighted to have this conversation and glad to be talking with all of you today about digital equity and how the digital divide impacts families and businesses in Central Washington and really across our state. I'm especially pleased today to be joined by local leaders who have been powerful advocates for digital equity in their respected communities, and I look forward to hearing from each of you this afternoon. But before we dive in, I want to take a step back and just say more about why this discussion is so important. For a lot of people in Washington State, having access to the internet is a given and it's a necessity. We use it to pay bills, we use it to do our taxes, we use it to keep in touch with our families, so many things. And that was true before the pandemic, and it has been even more true during this pandemic as work and school and healthcare and socializing have all moved online. But today, for too many families in our state, getting online isn't so easy to do. It's a serious challenge that has hurt students and workers, especially during this pandemic, and overwhelmingly affected communities of color, people with disabilities, households with low incomes, and our rural communities. We have made some headway expanding internet access to more families by investing in critical infrastructure like rural broadband. But we have a lot more work to do if we want to come out of this pandemic fairer and stronger when it comes to digital infrastructure, which is one of the reasons I am so excited about President Biden's American Jobs Plan, because it does that work. The American Jobs Plan would bring affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband to everyone in our state and our country, including the more than 30 million Americans that live in areas where there is no broadband infrastructure that provides minimally acceptable speeds. And it would do this by investing an historic $100 billion in building out our broadband infrastructure, especially in unserved and underserved communities and tribal lands. And the proposal looks to address some of the serious concerns around affordability. I was very proud to help secure funding for the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program in the December COVID package, and Congress should look at long-term programs to help address costs of these services. But coverage is just half of our battle, because even if your area has broadband access, you still need to have the hardware to actually get online. And importantly, the skills necessary to make the most of your internet connection. How many of us had a friend or a relative who needed help in getting online last year, figuring out how to use Zoom or registering for a vaccine? Because even if they had an internet connection, they still weren't really comfortable with using it. And this is not just an inconvenience. It might be the difference between doing a job interview or not today, or participating in a class or not, or getting sick or not. That is exactly why I have introduced the Digital Equity Act to get as many people as possible access to the tools they need to get online. What my legislation does is create 2 new federal grant programs at NTIA that would promote digital equity in communities across our country by funding the creation and implementation of comprehensive digital equity plans in every state, and supporting digital inclusion projects undertaken by local groups within their own communities. In effect, this means getting people the tools like hotspots and internet-connected devices and the training that they need so that once they have broadband access, they're able to get online and take advantage of their access. So those bills together, President Biden's American Jobs Plan and my Digital Equity Act, would build a bridge across the digital divide and make sure that internet access is a reality for everyone in Washington State. But in order to build that bridge, we have to pass the bills first. So I'm really excited today to hear from some folks on the ground in our state about how the digital divide is affecting them and about the importance of investing in broadband and digital equity. So thank you to all of our participants today. And with that, I am very pleased to turn it over to Ms. Davina Khan. She is a STEM computer science essentials teacher at West Valley Junior High School in Yakima. So go ahead, Ms. Khan.
Thank you so much, Senator Murray. It's a pleasure to be here. In the last year, like you said, COVID-19 has transformed the way we live, and it has especially transformed the way we teach and learn. And school life has been greatly impacted. And at my school, at my school district, we have been back in hybrid for a while, for a few months now, which means that students come face to face in person only twice a week. So there's heavy reliance on the use of technology. If there's a silver lining to this huge shift, it's that, you know, teachers, students, and parents have all had to get more proficient in technology. Um, and you know, from the way things are going, it's possible that some form of remote or hybrid learning will be with us from now on. It may exist as an option for some students, but regardless, we will need to be prepared for another similar situation in the future. And additionally, in this digital age, blended learning models are now being used globally in teaching, where students need technology to learn, to do research, and demonstrate what they've learned. For all of the above to happen, we need digital equity. And at our district, at my school district, West Valley School District in Yakima, we have been fortunate enough to have received a grant via T-Mobile that provided us with 400 hotspots. So students who live in areas which lack broadband or stable internet access, they've been covered. So of the 400 hotspots that we received, 396 are in use. So I think there's probably a very tiny number of students who are in an area with very spotty internet due to the topography. But we have actually received a national recognition, an award for our efforts to keep students engaged with learning via remote learning. So we have been very fortunate to have received this, and if we didn't, it would have been a lot of students without access, and that means a lot of students who would have not gained an education this year. So I am all for this act to be approved, and we need it to happen for us to move on. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Lisa Carstetter.
Thank you, Davina. Thank you, Senator Murray, for inviting me to today's meeting. I'm just so thankful for your leadership on this topic because it's especially important, and especially in my area, I think. Ironically, we're all here virtually today because we all have the digital resources. We need to do what we're doing, having this interview, doing our work, and just to be productive. But unfortunately, so many don't, especially here in my rural area in Central Washington. Digital equality and equity and inclusion is all very important. Educational and economic opportunities in the future will require that we remove all digital barriers required to achieve them. During the pandemic, I saw huge inequities around my area, around the access to the internet, the need for the devices and other tools, and digital skilling. When the pandemic first hit, most businesses, schools, and organizations had to pivot immediately to a virtual world. They were simply not equipped or prepared at all. 80% of the businesses in my town in Quincy did not have a presence on the internet. Fortunately, I was able to step in and fund tech grants so that many could purchase devices, laptops, hotspots, external computer cameras, and other needed equipment to keep their businesses open, people employed, and students learning. The demand was immense, and honestly, I wasn't able to help everyone. It was eye-opening, to say the least. In the schools, one-on-one devices became a necessity. Hotspots were needed for those with no access. Additional tech support was needed to help families who had no digital skills, and they had to learn how to navigate to help their children. For nonprofits, they needed devices, cameras, and other tools to continue to serve the needs of others and to keep their employees in jobs. And businesses of all sizes, I found, had no online presence, and they really struggled to keep their businesses open in a takeout and online world. It was a reality check, I think, most, for around here. And I think it was for many, of how unprepared they were to move into a world that is mostly digital. a local organization I know you're familiar with, Senator. It was formerly GWADA, but it's North Central, it's NCW Tech now. With the support of Microsoft, it launched an upskill program during this time where displaced employees or those folks who wanted to reskill could take free LinkedIn learning classes. But what we soon found is that many lacked the devices or internet, and with libraries and other places closed where they may traditionally have access, they couldn't even take the classes that we were offering for free. So that was a big reality check. I'll leave you with this story that happened last spring because it really touched my heart. During the beginning of the pandemic, a local Grant County student came home from Wazoo when their campus closed. This young girl comes from an underserved rural Hispanic family. She studied hard to obtain a full ride scholarship to be the first one in her family to go to college. One of the scholarships she received even provided her with a laptop. So fast forward, the pandemic hits, campus closed, she's sent home. Her family cannot afford internet, so she's unable to do her studies at home. So what does she do? She waits until her parents get home so that she can use the one car they have. She takes it, drives it to the truck stop on I-90, and she would sit outside the truck stop and use their public Wi-Fi and do her homework at night. As a mother, this hit me very hard, as not only does this show the inequity, but it's also a huge safety issue. This young girl is our future, and we must do what we can to close the digital divide so that we don't have to hear stories like hers and many others in the future. Thank you for all that you're doing for this, and I am totally leaned in to this Digital Equity Act. And now I'll pass it off to you, Amanda.
Thank you. I'm Amanda Six. I'm the library director in Stevens County in northeastern Washington. This county is the size of Delaware, but there's about 45,000 people. So the largest town is 5,000. So everybody's spread out all over the place. It's mountains and trees, so topography is a challenge. As a public library, we have 8 libraries. They're all small libraries around the county. And as Lisa said, libraries have been a link in rural areas forever for people to have access to the internet. When this happened with the pandemic, it really brought that home. We have high-speed Wi-Fi, and we have for 12 years probably have high-speed Wi-Fi available 24 hours a day outside of our library. So if you get off your shift at the mill at 3 a.m., you can go to the library and still get online and do your stuff. So we've had that. For me, the issues of equity involve infrastructure, which you've talked about, Senator Murray, and thank you, by the way. Kind of nervous, so just jumping in there, but thank you for having this together. The infrastructure is a piece that I'm part of a local broadband action team. We call it the BAT team. The BAT team, we've been working on infrastructure for at least 20 years. And in areas of rural areas with distances, I think the infrastructure piece is going to be complex. I also think the cost inequity that you addressed is a huge one. One of our libraries in the community of Hunters, Washington, which is an unincorporated small community, we can get 50 megabytes or a promise 50 megabytes for $900 a month. The downtown Seattle Public Library has the same ISP. They get a gigabyte for $1,000. Those kind of cost inequities in rural areas is a real challenge. The other piece with regard to infrastructure is the mapping, the FCC maps that show who has what. Those are self-reporting by the ISPs. So our county says we have 100 megabytes up and down, 100% coverage of the entire county, which is not accurate. Only a third of the people in the county have access to broadband, and fewer can afford it. We did go to hotspots. We got some great CARES grants. Hotspots are a challenge here because of the lack of cell coverage. So at my household, I have 2 kids, one in high school and one in junior high. For them to do homeschooling, we had to first buy a cell phone booster and for $800 and establish that. And then we were able to use a hotspot for them to connect. We had a pretty difficult winter with climbing on the roof daily to get the snow off the cell booster so that they can use the cell booster to then use the hotspot. It's still an ongoing challenge, and I think that lack of cell coverage is an equal piece in this, not just internet. And again, it's challenging in this topography. I currently got Starlink, So I just got that a little bit ago, a few months ago, so I'm able to have some high speed. Our solutions for our libraries, when we had to start serving people, we have hotspots for checkout that we got through CARES grant money. We also, though, got equipment for people to loan. And one of the big things we realized is a lot of people relied on our electricity to charge their devices. They'd drive 30 miles to town to do their work, their schoolwork, their online employment stuff, and they didn't have access to a place to charge. So we got CARES money for solar charging stations that are outdoors so people can charge their devices. We also worked with the local hospitals. We have a lot of people who live far distances. So to do telemedicine, which is increasingly an opportunity for both mental health and physical health. So the library created these telemedicine checkout kits that include a laptop and a hotspot. And they can have it for a month to take home, and they can do their follow-up appointments. It's also a little bit of a try before you buy kind of idea. If it works, and it's something your family can then afford, it's a way to sort of try it out and see if it does work there. So those are some of the solutions that we have tried to come up with and the challenges that we're facing. Our staff estimate in the public library today, probably 40% of our work is helping people with technology. A lot of that's device help, but the other piece of it is information literacy. So we get phone calls from people who say, there's no more phone books. How do I get the phone number for such and such? What's the phase of the moon today? They don't know how to use a device, but they call us to do it. And information and digital literacy is a huge concern for me. We are now entering second-generational illiteracy in this area. There are families in their 20s raising children who never learned how to use technology. And just like 100, 120 years ago when people didn't know how to read and write, and libraries and schools stepped in to help them, this is where we are now. And the social ramifications of two-generational digital illiteracy is just profound. In our area, people can only apply for unemployment online, and they don't know how, and they don't have access. They can't reach the services they need. So I am just thrilled that you are taking the leadership on this and helping move the ball forward. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to Angela.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Senator Murray, for doing this, for taking the lead so far before. So before the pandemic, lots of folks didn't understand that the digital divide was an issue that went beyond availability of broadband. Senator Murray did. That's why we had the Digital Equity Act, right? She figured that out before lots of other folks did. They needed a pandemic. And now lots of folks do understand, and that is amazing that we have more folks understanding that we can't just make sure the infrastructure is available. There are places where infrastructure is available and we still don't have folks using it regularly. Just as Amanda just described, that we now have this generational issue, which is heartbreaking. And so we as a community have to be like, okay, this is not all right. And we are going to fix this. And we've seen that in local communities all across the country, particularly during the pandemic, using their CARES Act money to address this issue. And they're doing it in super creative ways, right? Trying to figure out how to make sure folks have low cost broadband, how to make sure they have a device in the home always, not just one on loan. And it's not just a mobile phone. And that digital literacy piece of it, just as Amanda described, folks used to go into libraries to get that support and then they couldn't. So then who were they going to? And lots of really creative communities were figuring out how to provide that support over the phone, that digital literacy support, or how to get someone to be able to do it over video, but you have to teach them how to do it over video first, right? So hooray for all the creative solutions during the pandemic. But what's really been clear is that if folks at that local level would use their own CARES Act money in order to be able to provide these services, the need is definitely there, right? The investment is wanted. And what the Digital Equity Act does is create more of that, those resources, that investment. So this is amazing. And NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, is totally thrilled to be part of the solution. Thank you, Senator Murray.